We'll call the meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, we'll open the meeting up to public comment. Please state your name, please.
Dan Wetzel. Do I need to use the podium?
No.
Okay. All right. On tonight's agenda is the retirement of Mrs. Arlene Rana. And I would like just to take a moment first to personally thank her for her assistance making my tenure as principal of Highland Middle School successful. More importantly, I'd like to take a minute to discuss my ideas of success. In my mind, it's not the car that you drive, how much money you make, or how far you've gone in your career. I think it's more aptly defined by the number of lives that you've touched. And over the past 10 years, as I've watched Arlene greet parents with a smile day after day, help staff create a really great day for students, and most importantly, help students feel that they belong and are cared for in a large school building, I believe that Arlene is one of the most successful people I know. Arlene, the Highland School District will miss you, I will miss you, and its children will miss you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mark Reynolds, Southern Ulster Times. When you get to the point of the budget, I wondered if you could delve into the fact about the health insurance premiums rising $432,000. The reason I asked it was I was just at a meeting with the Marlborough School District last week, and theirs are going up $100,000. So I'm just curious why this one is going up so much.
Sure, I can respond now, or?
Yeah, why don't you?
We have 4 different health insurance plans in this district: Orange Ulster Health Insurance, NISHIP, CDPHP, and MVP. I know that the NISHIP rates, they go up in January of each year. They're not on a school calendar year. They went up 8%, and the Orange Ulster rates are going up 7%. So it's a combination of those factors. But I don't know what Marlborough had in their base budget, so I can't really compare in that sense. But if you look at our baseline when we have our budget come out, you'll be able to see that it's more in line with a 7% or a 6% increase.
Is that what's happening on average in the region?
Yes, from what I can see. You know, those are 2 plans, MVP and CDPHP. We don't know exactly what the rate increases are yet. We don't get them until sometime in late April or May.
Has there ever been discussion about trying to work with, let's say 4 or 5 different school districts to join together?
The Orange Ulster plan is a consortium of 21 districts.
21, wow.
Yeah, and NISHIP is a statewide plan. It has blended rates, so that's it. It's what we, and those, by the way, those plans are both cited in the bargaining units. So we can't just unilaterally pick a less expensive plan without negotiating it first.
But if I recall, in reading the minutes of the Ulster County meeting, there was something in there where they talked to Senator Amador about Ulster County health costs in general and the rising costs, if I recall. I read those minutes. So I don't think it's just a Highland issue. I think other schools in Ulster County are experiencing it.
I think it's a national thing.
Right,
Affordable Care Act has driven it significantly.
Right. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Thank you. Well, tonight we have a special presentation. A while back, a former student of Highland Central School District came forward to the Board of Education and presented a plan to dedicate our chorus room, our music room, to a retired teacher of the district who has given back tremendously to the school community and the community in general. And Olivia Pacheco was the individual that came forward to present to us an idea to dedicate that music room to Patty Stephens in honor of her daughter. So Olivia, do you want to say a little something right now and then we'll do the presentation? Or?
I didn't plan anything.
Sally, do you want to add anything?
Certainly, I would say that there are very few people that I think deserve this honor more than Hattie. She certainly,
I'm going to ask to use the podium to hold on to it. Those of you that know me, I'm normally not even nervous talking, but I promised Olivia she and I could just hold on to it while we talk. Did you want to say anything? Okay. I hear that she said a lot to you during the summer, and I knew nothing of it but 2 days before. And you should know a short little story. Olivia asked me to go out to breakfast with her, and we didn't breakfast together. And I was like, okay, and there was an embarrassing scene at New Paltz Bistro when I burst into tears, and she said this, and I was just so touched and surprised and beyond for how much I love and appreciate Highland. Olivia, again, didn't know this. When did you graduate?
2009.
2009. So here it was 2017, and she began talking to you about this, and she was just a wonderful student of mine, and before she became a student of mine, when my Alicia had passed away, she would sit outside my classroom every morning and just say, good morning, how are you, and give me a hug, for 2 years before she graduated. So this is a wonderful young woman who graduated from Highland, and she at graduation won the Women's Empowerment Award given by Fiona Ormiston, a past board member. So I'm just forever appreciative of Olivia. And I asked her to stand near me for me to say a few words. Again, I was so surprised, and in July, when people poured into the auditorium, I said to my family, I said, all I could picture was a movie that my mother showed us every year of It's a Wonderful Life. And at the end, people coming in, and it was just so beautiful that I thought, wow, that was it. And then when I heard that it was another plaque to be given tonight, I asked if I could say a few words. And it's heavy. Now, the one, whoa, it's really heavy. So, the one real surprise. Now, I did hear that you also designed it or had something go with what other plaques were in the school. So when I first saw, she sent me a text of it, and I first saw Patricia Steffens on it, I was like, wait a minute, I'm here. I'm not gone yet, and I hope it's okay that I put it that way, but it's kind of true. It's like, people are going to think I'm gone, that hadn't known me, but I won't be gone. I won't be gone from Highland until the last time, right, Sarah, that I can step in. When my daughter passed away, and I looked out at the wake and the line outside. This is going to be our 13th senior citizen prom that I do, and when I tell you the number of senior citizens that in July were out online there, I made a vow. I said I will never stop volunteering for the love that I get at Highland, and that was 13 years ago. So I know Olivia explained, but I just want to give a little bit. Okay, so Patricia Steffens, you're going to get questions. Who is Patricia Steffens? Because I retired 8 years ago. So who was I other than a teacher? When I started teaching in 1987 in Highland, your children were allowed to go to the district. I understand that was expensive, but they offered that to all the teachers. So I was like, oh yes, I'm bringing my 2 kids from Tulsa, New York, every morning with me, and they came to the district. So my Alicia and Daniel not only attended this district until it was no more that it could be afforded by the district, and I understood that, although Alicia sobbed, but they attended the district with me. And Alicia was on that stage at the high school. We used to have an all-district talent show. I don't know if any of you remember that. So elementary, middle, and high school all competed against each other. And they were pretty upset the first year that my Alicia and her brother were in it, because they were in kindergarten and first grade, and they were against rock bands and all that, but they were so cute when they sang That's What Friends Are For, and they won at the talent show. And they were in it another year, a couple of years later, on that same stage, and she sang the Mariah Carey Hero. And we brought down the screen, and we had pictures of Martin Luther King, pictures of Kennedy. How could they not when we, gave that show? And she was on the stage when I directed Fiddler on the Roof. I used to direct the plays, and I put her in the plays with me. She was going to Highland at that time, the elementary school. And that was in 1993 when we dedicated the auditorium to Bob Casper. So you'll see Robert Casper on one of the plaques. Lem Atkins, that's on the plaque in the gym, was a friend of mine. His daughter and I were cheerleaders together. Lem Atkins had passed away a number of years ago, and of course Jack Mesquita is the other. So when people ask, no, I'm not gone yet, but I will continue on and on. Over these years, we give a Love Out Loud. So the next thing on it is the Love Out Loud. What is that? That's the scholarship that we give. And so far, we've given $12,000 over the years. Sometimes it's an emotional mother. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm going to give 3 scholarships this year, or I'm going to give, 2. And we do fundraisers, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to try to not talk as long as I'm talking. So in celebration of her daughter, Alicia. So other than Alicia being with me in everything with the school, when it came time, and again, we all understood it, that the board had to tell all of us teachers that had children in the school district that it wasn't affordable anymore, and we understood it. And Alicia left to New Paltz, but she never really left Highland. She kept her friends here. She came back. She was involved in any of the trips I took. I used to run the EF trips to Europe, and she came with me to Europe. She came when we went to Canada to plant trees with the tree committee. If you know the name of the tree committee from our history, she was with us with everything. And then her senior year in high school, she decided to join New Visions in New Paltz. I do have to say, one of the best things that happened, she sobbed going to New Paltz instead of Highland, but Bill Zimmer was the best senior class advisor and advisor for her, and he was just, she was in plays with him. He directed plays. But she met the love of her life here in Highlands. She went to Highlands prom. She signed up for New Visions, and she shadowed me. So she was in my classroom for a year, her senior year in high school, shadowing to become a Spanish teacher. But then, truthfully, she saw how much work we did at night with correcting lesson plans and that. So she went into college as an English major. So I gave a lot of assemblies here, and my vow would be to do that too. I gave 4 or 5 about, Alicia. Alicia died as a passenger in a car at the age of 21. As a passenger, she was a senior in Albany, and she auditioned with opera, and she was in the choir, and her choir got to sing with Kenny Rogers. And I went to every concert that she sang at, and that was her last one in the senior year. And because the girl that was driving was 19 and Alicia only knew her for 2 weeks. Alicia's car had broken down, and she needed a ride to get to a train station to meet her then-to-be fiance from Highland. And his Coast Guard ship was coming in, and they got on. The driver, and then Alicia was in the passenger seat, got on an exit. It was late at night, and they died in a head-on collision. But Albany wanted to make it, an important statement about drinking and driving. Yes, they had gone out and had a couple of drinks, although Alicia was a 21-year-old passenger. I wanted to share that message in assemblies, but I didn't want to share it as I'm sharing it with you now. I gave no excuses. I talked about decisions and even the designated drivers, and I think that was part of Olivia. I had them sign, papers, before would go to a prom and that. And my last one that I gave, I took out the police report and I gave specifics, and I said, please, after this third or fourth assembly. So I think what I also want to say, if anyone asks, you know, who's this person, she's still around, you'll probably see her, because she keeps coming into Highland, and this is the scholarship. This girl loved Highland right up until the very end, and all of her friends from Highland are still her friends, and my friends now. And my son stood up at his sister's service, celebration of life, and I'm going to end with a quote of his. He said, "I dedicate my life to be whatever my sister wanted it to be, and I dedicate mine to keep volunteering at Highland." I love you all out loud. And please tell the choir teacher that I didn't get to talk to her.
All right, can we get a picture though, maybe with Olivia and Patty and
Oh,
either?
there's a quote at the bottom. "Love, like a beautiful song, echoes on in the heart, even when the last note is silent." And that's on Alicia's headstone. It was a favorite quote.
Patty, I just want to say, one of the things that swayed the entire board was Olivia's, she pointed out that you were the quintessential teacher and that you took the most tragic moment in your life and the person you loved more than anything, and you turned that into a teachable moment for the other children that you love like your own. And it was that swayed the board to say, this is truly what we want of all teachers, is someone who's always teaching to the positive, to the hopeful, and the way that you live your life, and you continue to share with us, and that's really what moved us.
And I have to say, one of Alicia's favorite trips was up to the Ronald McDonald House when Tobias was born. She went up and she sang with the kids. It was at Christmas time. It was one of her favorite. It made her fall in love with Albany, and that's where she went to college. And her sorority used to nickname her Ronald McDonald. She would go over there. Or maybe she ate there all the time. I'm going to say it's because she went to Ronald McDonald House.
And just a thank you to Olivia.
Oh,
She was, she had
Unbelievable.
emailed us constantly. She had presented us with several plaques for the board and herself to make the decision of which one we'd want to have hanging outside that chorus room in their honor. So, Olivia, I want to thank you on behalf of the entire board for what you started and what you completed and where we are today. And it's all because of you.
And continue that
And
passion
you're
and
so
advocacy.
lucky to
She
have
lived
her.
up to the award. I didn't know about this other award until you mentioned it this evening.
Yeah?
She's
Oh,
really
yeah.
embodied that.
She got that in high school, and she is
You don't stop,
powerful.
Olivia.
And you're so lucky to have her as a
Continue being
coach.
an advocate.
And as a matter of fact, she got here tonight running
After the basketball
from
game.
the basketball game. Where was the basketball
In
game?
Beacon.
In Beacon, and got
Oh,
here
right.
right
I
on
was a little
time.
lucky.
You just go to support anything. There's, Olivia is the tops. If you had, I will write the letter of recommendation if you have any opening.
Maybe if you stand by the, our official, no, I don't think you can. I'll take this. So, and over here.
Good night, Ed.
Yeah, so why don't you, so maybe just leave it back on the table back there, and then, we'll take care of it.
Oh, Dean works with the senior citizen club. I did just want to first check. And boy, you should keep the secret. I just announced it before you announced it.
You were class of 09?
Yes.
I remember when we were itty bitty.
Derek.
Nice job.
Thank you. Thank you.
November.
Thank you. I need to give you that. Is it gonna be? We bought a house.
You did?
Yes.
Oh my God.
It's great.
I can't follow that. I'm just saying.
Don't worry. Night.
Good night. Okay, we'll do our budget presentation for 2018-19 school year.
Good night, thank you.
So you should all have a budget presentation in front of you. Looks like this behind your agenda. So I'll start by saying, I apologize for not being here a couple weeks ago, but we are on track and we will go over budget in the next couple of meetings. So we started with a rollover budget. And what I'm going to talk about, other than the rollover, is what's different really. You can see it's got the current educational program and related staffing. And to that tune, it certainly continues to follow the existing labor relation contracts we have. New debt for the 2014 referendum and any bans. New debt for prior year bus propositions. Includes funding for known staff movements. We have 2 retirements we know of. Includes also retiree health. And it retains $100,000 in the interfund transfer for food service. I've just included that on there. Everything else is really different, but just because I know that has come up throughout the year. So the debt is, this debt that has come on as a result of this $17.5 million capital project has been structured in several ways. Some of it was short-term financing. This year, so we've got some, it's turned into longer-term financing, which is known as serial bonds. The increase in debt for the 18-19 budget for the new buses, recent years, is $128,000. Now, this is all on the expenditure side. As you know, we talk about aid that is attributable to this debt. So for the new buses, we will be getting transportation aid, which will show on the revenue side. This is just the expenditure, the appropriation portion. And then the referendum debt of $1,494,000, that is the new debt. And again, we'll talk about the associated revenue, but that's for the borrowing. Pension costs, this is blended, but we have $125,000 new. TRS went up this year. ERS, I think, is relatively constant. And health insurance premium increases. The rest is just a little bit here and there. I've lumped it together because it's really not very significant. Didn't feel that it warranted a lot of discussion. So I put together this pie chart just so we can see what's driving our budget. And again, it's really just the information you saw on the previous slide, but this new debt, again, when you think about a balanced budget, which we'll talk about later, you think about the revenues balancing with the expenditures. But so again, there's that revenue that we'll see in the form of building aid or transportation aid that will help balance that. Okay, these are factors influencing past budgets and levies. And this is a slide that you probably haven't seen before. It's just a compilation of previous data, and it shows the correlation from the CPI, which you can see over the last 5 years, when, of course, we've had the tax cap in these last 5 years, so it couldn't be greater than 2%. So you can see 5 years ago it was 2%. Then it ranged from a low of 0.12 to a high of 1.62. And of course, for the 18-19, you'll see a little bit further on, it will again be 2%. But so you can see in the years where the CPI is high, the levy and the budget generally follow. Now here's the levy limit calculation. Prior year levy, we apply a growth factor, which was pointed out to me today. I'm not really sure what the state considers when they develop that number, but they publish these numbers, every school district gets them. And I committed to doing a little bit of research, but that's a New York State published number. So, by the way, I always find this interesting. Highland is one of the higher growth rates in the county. So that allows for $140,000 in increase to the levy. The prior year pilot is added in and later subtracted, you can see that below. CPI is 2%, but the biggest thing I'd like to draw your attention to is we back out the prior year exclusions. Exclusions are things that you're allowed, remember we talk about this 2% tax cap formula, which we all associate with being 2%, but we know it's not a true 2% because the biggest factor here is the exclusions, and the debt is obviously what's driving that. So in this year, you can see at the bottom, the net change to the levy is 4.45%. Are there any questions about the calculation before I move on? Okay, so these are the revenues associated with this budget. That is, the taxes of 28 million is at the levy limit. It is right at the levy limit. State aid is what the governor has proposed in his initial proposal. However, I have made some adjustments to err on the side of caution, to be super conservative, because they have assumed that worst case scenario is we're gonna get a full year of building aid for all projects. And we all know that we've not done some of the projects yet. Roof work's not done, we're talking about closing them out. Obviously, we wanna close those out so that the building aid is paid in the same year as the debt lines up. But I wanna be cautious there, and we can talk about a little bit later in the presentation what that means if we get more there. Generally, when there's a governor's proposal, we generally get a little bit more aid when they finalize the state budget. Again, we can talk about what that means a little bit further. Everything else is really relatively constant. Other revenues is things like interest, non-resident tuition, prior year refund, Medicaid, federal Medicaid, and then there's a small new pilot. Appropriated fund balance, you can see we're still at the level we've been using in the last few years, $1.5 million. We've not used any of the accrual or any of the debt service. And those are things that we've talked about. And we can talk about those as we go on if we'd like to. So this is a slide that you're not accustomed to seeing this time of the year. Is the budget balanced? Normally at this point, we have a gap. And I guess normally I'll say, maybe we've proposed a few things, but this year, I guess when we looked at this administratively, we recognized that the debt was a significant driver. So I think we were fairly conservative looking at what could we do this year, and I don't know, I'm anxious to hear some feedback. But so the budget to budget difference as we're talking about the draft, by the way, this is still a draft budget, is a 4.99% increase. Of course, the levy, we already talked about that, is a 4.45% increase. the slide where we talk about what it takes to balance a budget. And we talk about if we wanted to increase expenditures, we have to increase revenues. Maybe that would mean, I don't know, we're limited now, we can increase revenues. Maybe it would mean we would increase the budget, but we would have an associated increase in state aid. Maybe it would mean we would pierce the cap. Maybe we would decrease expenditures and use our revenues in a slightly different way. But so there's only 3 ways to balance a budget. Right now, with the prior slide, we have a balanced budget. But the reason I keep this slide in each year is to caution you that if we increase expenditures or decrease revenues, you know, there's both sides of the budget that need to be balanced. So I went over that fairly quickly, and maybe we can get some feedback. We can have some questions and answers. I'm sure, I haven't been here in a year where we've had debt really driving our budget. We know that these are all things that we've talked about for years. These are plans that we knew were for the best interest of Highland, taking care of our facilities, modernizing our bus fleet. All of these things, you know, we knew at some point they would hit our budget, and this is the year that a portion of it is hitting our budget.
So would you, Louise, consider this a rollover budget presentation?
But I can't call it a true rollover because,
Right, we know the factors, they're
Yeah.
listed there. So, in our rollover scenario, we need to get to 60% approval to stay there?
no, this is a, it's not piercing the cap. This is
Okay.
50%. This would require a simple majority.
Okay, and that, the difference is, you mentioned 4.9 and the difference of 4.5. That difference is what we're looking to capture?
So 4.9 is the budget to budget
Right.
increase. The 4.45 is what the levy would rise to if this were the budget we presented to the voters.
Okay,
So we always talk about those two numbers.
right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the levy cap right now is 2.82%?
The levy cap right now is 4.45%. What slide are you looking at, Sue?
I'm looking on page 3.
Slide 5.
Yes, slide 5.
Yes, so this is factors
No,
influencing
history.
budget. This is prior budgets.
Prior.
So right now, we're in the 17-18 year. Our last year figures were, the levy was 2.82 increase.
Okay, I'm
And the
sorry.
budget was 3.24.
sorry.
That's okay.
So our levy cap right now is 4.4.
4 or 5.
Okay.
And our budget increase is 4.99.
So, I think
Well,
I'm
it's
still
pretty
missing
close.
something, so we still have a small gap, right?
No, we do not. We do not currently have a
So
gap.
the levy limit is 4.45, right?
Yes.
And a rollover would mean 4.99.
No, the levy, so if the levy increases by 4.45, between that state aid and the other revenues, it will give us sufficient
We cover
revenues
budget
to balance
budget
a budget increase of 4.99.
So we're in good shape.
Well, I'll say that, you know, first of all, these are higher budget numbers than we've seen in a few years, yes. CPI has grown, we know we have some economic growth. The debt's hit in a year where that's happened, I suppose that could be seen as a positive thing. Now, one factor I've not said, well, I said it, but I don't know that it resonated. Generally, an approved budget means more state aid. So that may, you know, provide.
And you're using conservative numbers in this,
Yes, and I
Yes.
used very conservative
It's
numbers in the
election.
building aid.
so it can
Because-
only get better.
It can only get better.
Right, so, but we didn't come out, you know, I know some years, many districts, you know,
Right.
it's doom and gloom and, you know, we're gonna need to cut the X number. So we're not saying that. This maintains all positions, all programs. There are no new
Right.
programs or positions in this budget, but it maintains everything we have, and it can only get better depending on what comes down from the government.
Right, so just for my colleagues who might not be tuned in to all of those numbers and how they interact, what slide tells them that?
Yeah, slide 8 brings it all together.
We can count on that anticipated state increase, you think, you feel confident?
Absolutely. You know I'm very conservative. I mean, if I have to choose anything, I'm gonna conservatively choose it. It's not my style to ever tell you something has not materialized.
Louise, this year, compared to previous years, we don't have a gap right now.
That's
Well,
correct.
What would it take, what do we need to be able to initiate some new initiatives?
Well,
Increase the state aid? That'd be a,
increased state aid, absolutely,
and
would
you've
do
been
that.
conservative there with that number, so
I
there's
am.
the potential for that.
I am. Now, I also, because we've not had significant budget discussion, I don't know what the board's comfort level is with presenting a budget that's greater than 5%. I will say this, we do know that Highland has historically had one of the lower budgets, if not the lowest in the county. I am doing some research on that right now, trying to see how we match up to our peers. But I guess, in light of, past budgets, I think we wanna present a budget that can be adequately supported. Now, let's just say we were to get $350,000 in additional state aid, we could potentially increase the budget for that, both sides. If we had the revenue, the board has the authority to increase the appropriation, it would be like a donation. That's an option. The other option would be.
And are those increases usually sustained years later?
Well, generally we don't get less state aid unless we have declining debt that falls off.
Okay,
So I'll
Usually
put that
it is.
caveat on there.
thank you.
But this 4.99 budget increase is actually our largest since 2013-14.
It is.
Yes, it is.
So this may or may not be the year to grow program.
Well,
It's,
There is a way you can grow program, if I may, and that is to, again, look for ways to reuse money that's in the existing budget to be more, we're always saying the word, so I'm gonna use it again, because it's one that should be used around budget time. Internal efficiencies that might be able to be streamlined, budget items that could be recaptured, can also fuel, rather than other methods.
Right.
Might be.
Are you able to see how other districts are faring out, or is it too early to tell? Because I wouldn't want Highland to be the highest levy in the county.
well, so it's
Because
just
of our
starting.
debt.
It's
Yeah.
really just starting. So the tax cap is due March 1st. Really, it's, a week. So we're just starting to look at that data. And I would say, we may be the highest. I know that New Paltz, because I ran into Rick Linden at an event over the weekend. I know New Paltz is got new debt as well. What I'm finding is the drivers are really the new debt. TRS, it's not enough to be an exclusion, the increase this year, although it is a driver, but it's a smaller driver. I will see how we stack up. We'll share that information with the board once we assemble
Not that
that.
it can make a difference, but
Yeah.
it's just something good to know.
I mean,
Because
again-
Alan made a good
Comparison
point,
data
it
is
will be the
always-
largest in years.
Right, I think it would be useful to see what other districts are at, what their enrollment is, and certainly what their base budget was to start with, because those are all factors.
Wow, this is just too good.
I don't know,
As Tom said, no doom and gloom, this is wonderful.
well, are there any questions?
No, I understand what you're saying, Sue, but I've been saying this for some time, that we have to be able to offer more to our students.
But I think
And
Tom
I
has some
piggyback
good
what
ideas
I
about
piggyback
that.
what Mike says, somewhere along the line, if there are new initiatives that, staffing or administrators want, let's hear it, and let's see how they can do that internally.
Right.
Because I do feel, we don't have a gap, but we have the largest budget increase in 5 years. And that's, a little concerning to me.
You're also debt-driven.
Right.
Yeah, which has been
Which the
supported by the
community has
voters.
approved.
Nothing we can
That's-
do.
The fact that that
Understood.
gets pulled out of that 2% drives me crazy personally. I should leave it in, because then it affects the number,
Right,
right?
Right,
right.
right.
So we gotta pull it out, and that's,
That's the formula. We have no
It is the
way
formula.
around
It is what it is, and I think we're still in good shape.
Yeah, it's nice to sit here and not
Yeah.
say we got a gap to
Right,
right.
Yeah.
fill.
right.
Mark had a question.
I just had a question on the use of the fund balance, the 1,500,000.
Yes.
That's been for the last few years, you said. What do you
That's correct.
project, what will that leave you presently, and what do you project that in coming years?
Well, I would just say that as we were analyzing the budget and really trying to keep the number, what I would consider somewhat affordable, recognizing it's one of the higher numbers that we've seen, I would say that, we will regenerate that $1.5 million. We may next year need to use some debt service money. We may have to use some of the other modest reserves that we have. It was really tight in really pulling this budget in, but obviously I'm not gonna tell you the number I started with, it wasn't a 4 though. So,
Do you know what's in there, when you use this year? What
Yes.
will be in the reserves?
so this $1.5 million that I'm talking about will be leftover unspent funds from the 17-18 school year. Based on what occurs next year, in the 18-19 year, we may have additional retirements, we may get more state aid. There's just too many factors for me to give you a number of what we'll be using for the 19-20 budget. But I can assuredly tell you that between the unspent fund balance and then other reserves, we will need $1.5 million for the subsequent year's budget.
Right, for, not next year, for instance.
Yes.
But what does that leave you with today? Do you think you have in your reserves?
You mean what I have left in the 17-18 budget?
Right,
What's
in
left in
reserves.
that?
Yeah. Right now, I have a little bit more than $1.5 million. We are still doing some end-of-year spending. As you know, we have capital project, there's little pieces sometimes that weren't factored in there, so there are some expenditures that are still being generated and hitting the general fund. So I can't give you a precise number, but I can tell you it's somewhere between $1.5 million and probably $1.8 million.
Okay.
But it's still early, we're still paying for subs and, all of the things that we do the last 4 months of the school year.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
So just, I have a question, just in line with the $1.5 million. If we do get, increased state aid, say that that's a conservative number and that does change, is there the opportunity to reduce that reliance on the fund balance
Yes.
of 1.5?
Yes, and there's not, we can do that in July if we chose to. Let's say we got 300,000 more, and I'll just give you a couple of scenarios. We could use $1.2 million, and we could put another 300 in the capital reserve. There's all those different options. Let's say we got 10 tax certs between now and then. We may wanna, increase our tax certiorari reserve. We don't have a lot of reserves here. This budget, by the way, does maintain that we will continue to have the 4% unassigned fund balance.
Okay.
But we don't have wealthy reserves here, right? Very modest, but it gives us some opportunities.
This is great.
So, in my career, I've worked with people, I've picked up a few examplicisms. So, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. So this is a good, modest start, and I think we're going in a good direction. So I do want to thank Louise and her staff and Sarah for all the work on this budget, and I think we're, we're very hopeful for future presentations.
Anything anyone needs from Louise for our next meeting, budget discussion? Okay, moving on to acceptance of reports. Be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, approves and acknowledges reviewing the following reports. Board of Education meeting minutes, our internal claims audit report, our treasurer's report for January 2018, our general fund report for January 2018, our school lunch fund, our special aid fund, and our capital fund. And also our co-curricular extra activities quarterly report. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Mike, second by Tom. Discussion?
Did anybody, I didn't get a chance to read the minutes, so as long as somebody else did, I'm comfortable with it.
I did.
Okay, okay, very good, thank you.
Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Curriculum and instruction. Anybody have any questions or concerns about our director's reports? Everybody's good?
Good.
Okay, under personnel. Are you okay with taking personnel as a block from A through E? And as Dan recognized Arlene, we'll also recognize her again with regrets.
Absolutely.
We're good? No.
Oh, okay.
Good, so can I,
Yeah.
okay, Mike?
I'll have a question about one of them, but let's move forward with the motion and then do it.
As a block?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Yeah, that's,
Take them as a block from A through E. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Tom, second by Mike. Discussion.
with the Charles Whitty resignation, how are we doing the second half of the year? It's gonna be,
We posted right now.
okay.
It just got posted.
I'm confident we'll have someone very soon.
Okay. Just to also echo comments about Arlene Reyna, longtime employee with the district, we wish her well and healthy in the afterlife. All right.
Okay, no other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Dean, you're up.
Howdy, good evening. I first wanted to, the girls varsity basketball team, congratulate them on winning Section 9 champs. And applaud them for doing another great season of basketball. Another note, spring sports have began yesterday. Student Council has begun selling shamrocks to raise money to find a cure for muscle dystrophy. Student Council also started the first, set up some appointments with Mr. Bon Jovi to have the lunch with soup, so we began that today. Me and two other students had the lunch with Ms. Bon Jovi. It was really nice, and we had some interesting conversations and just talking about the school, so I think they really appreciated talking to him, and they said, although they were nervous and they're like, oh, but then they definitely were, they said they definitely appreciated that he was interested in hearing their thoughts on the school, and so I was happy to hear that they had a good time. Mock trial won both of the trials that they've participated in so far. Peer Leadership is currently planning a board game night to raise money for some of their initiatives, such as, it's my understanding that Peer Leadership will pay for new students' lunches and have like sort of like a welcome to these new students to the district and show them around. Fed Challenge has their presentation on Wall Street this upcoming Tuesday. Interact is having their Castle Point field trip this upcoming Thursday. Not this Thursday, excuse me, next Thursday. Interact also finalized the donations and proceeds from the dance. So we donated the $250 to the St. Jude's Give a Kiss campaign with the girl Quinn that Mr. Fripp discussed last meeting. We're going to be donating $500 to the backpack program, $100 to Sloan Kettering's Children's Research Hospital, $100 to the Sarah Strong Foundation, $100 to the Alzheimer's Association, $250 to the Hudson Valley Semper Fi parents, and they send care packages over to people fighting in the war, and they need some financial support with paying that shipping cost because they can be expensive. And then we also are donating $700 to the Highland Public Library, $500 in some furniture, and then $200 in books. So we thought that was a great opportunity to, we used the dance to give back to local community, local charities, and we thought this was a really great opportunity because it affects our whole community of Highland. Mall UN has scheduled a mini month on the 12th to prepare for their upcoming conference in SUNY New Paltz. The PTSA is currently planning the after prom party and full force to have another good after prom party at the Wood. The yearbook club is, I just decided, I was like, you know, we should talk about the yearbook club because they always do such a great job on the yearbook and they're always doing their work, and I might not have updates on the progress, but they're doing good, I think. So I'm, you know, finalizing that, so good for them.
Top secret.
And then the last thing is just a date to maybe remember if you'd like to go. The comedy show for the Sarah Strong Foundation is March 31st from 7 to 10 p.m. Saturday.
I have a question, Sam.
Yeah.
How do you become so inspiring at such a young age to become so community involved? What's happened in your life?
I always, there's a lot of things, but one of them I always say is both of my parents went to Marlboro, and you know, a lot of kids when you're in elementary school, their best friends are their parents, you know, so their friends are their parents, their parents are friends, so then they end up being friends, and I never had that because my parents were from Marlboro and they didn't really know anybody, and you know, usually people in Highlands stay in Highlands, so they'll end up, their kids will be friends with, you know, each other. So for me, I always wanted to be able to be part of the community in Highland and, you know, just know people and not like be the one who's the outcast, and you know, I wanted to be part of that. And then it's also just about, you know, family values and just growing up and, you know, always, my parents always teaching me to lend a hand when you can, and, you know.
God bless your parents.
It's great, because I was at the game the other day, and he was there with Mom. And,
Yeah.
you know, we saw one another, I was there with the fam, but it was an excellent report. I always appreciate Dean, you really give the board a lot of what the students are up to. But certainly the work of that Interact Club, and look at all this money and where they're donating it to. And on the backdrop, we have our Highland mission statement, so I couldn't, like, this is like what I'm looking at, and I said to myself, you really embody what that's doing,
Yeah,
that and the
you do.
students you represent, so, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, the Interact Club does a lot, and it's something I'm very proud to be president of and, you know, participate in, because it's definitely my favorite club. You know, don't tell the other ones that I'm president of, but.
I think they probably won't watch the board video, you know.
So we do a lot of fun activities, and, yeah, thank you.
Good stuff, thank you, Dean. Any other questions for Dean? Thank you. Good, just to replicate it.
Yeah, right, yes.
Okay,
Yes,
under business and
replicate.
operations, health and welfare contracts. Celebrity Central School District, be resolved that the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, approves a 2017-18 health and welfare contract for one student at a cost of $796.21 per student, for a total of $796.21. Celebrity Central School District, and authorizes the board president and district clerk to execute the contract. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Mike, second by Tom. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Arlington Central School District be resolved, Board of Education, upon the recommendation of superintendent, approves the 2017-18 health and welfare contract for 42 students at a cost of $750.46 per student, for a total of $31,519.32 with the Arlington Central School District, and authorizes the board president and district clerk to execute the contract. Can I have a motion, please? Sue, second by Tom. Discussion?
I got a question for you, Louise. The invoice, the actual invoice has, like, Holy Trinity can't bill us? it has to go through like a regular school district?
It does,
That's so interesting,
yeah,
like it's like layers.
it is,
Yeah.
there are layers.
Yeah,
So that's number 42.
Yes.
yeah, no, but it's just interesting to me, like, why did they
That's
just build?
private schools within
They can't
the
build.
Arlington School District, and the
Right.
money's gotta flow through the public entity. I'm
Okay.
sure it's for the accountability purposes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just,
You got
it's
more
interesting.
accountability with a public school than a
Yeah,
private, but
I
that's how
guess
they
so.
tap into it.
Yeah, okay.
They can control it that way too, by state aid.
Yeah, it's, yeah.
Yeah,
And I noticed that Arlington added on a 5% administrative fee.
yeah,
I got a kick out of that. Oh,
most of them do that, believe it or not.
$346,000.
yeah, that's some chunk of change.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Budget transfer, be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, approve the following budget transfer in the amount of $230,472 for the 2017-18 school year as follows. Budget transfer number 7219, $219,584. Budget transfer number 7220, $10,888. Budget transfer number 7534, $16,800. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Mike, second by Tom. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Bus purchase proposition for 2018-19 school year. Be it resolved that the following proposition to be placed on the ballot at the annual meeting of the qualified voters of the Highland Central School District to be conducted on May 15, 2018. Proposition, shall the Board of Education of the Highland Central School District be authorized to purchase 3 65-passenger auto gas buses at $113,000 each for a maximum estimated cost of $339,000. 2 29 30-passenger vans at $61,500 each for a maximum estimated cost of $123,000, and 1 wheelchair van at a maximum estimated cost of $69,000, and 1 7-passenger Suburban at a maximum estimated cost of $45,000. And safety and communication equipment at a maximum estimated cost of $12,000 for aggregate maximum estimated cost of $588,000, and the sum of $588,000 or so much thereof as may be necessary shall be raised by the levy of a tax upon the taxable property of said school district and collected in annual installments as provided by section 416 of this education law. In anticipation of such tax, obligation to the district shall be issued. And be it further resolved that the school district clerk is hereby authorized and directed to publish this proposition in the legal notice of annual meeting, election, and vote in the designated newspaper. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Heather, second by Tom. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Surplus vehicles, be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, approves the vehicles as presented to the board at this meeting as surplus, and that the district will dispose the following vehicles in the least costly manner, as is, where is, at the earliest opportunity. Vehicle 125, vehicle 140, and vehicle 143. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Mike, second by Tom. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. Donation. Be it resolved, the Board of Education, upon the recommendation of the superintendent, accepts the requested donation on behalf of Mr. Robert J. Swartz in the amount of $35,000 specifically for the purposes of scholarships for the Highland High School. Can I have a motion, please? Motion by Heather, second by Tom. Discussion?
So I'd like to thank the
Yeah,
for this
absolutely.
very generous donation.
And I understand he was a teacher?
Former teacher in the district. Yeah, former teacher years ago.
Yeah.
And is there any specifics on how it's going to be distributed?
it just said a Highland scholarship, so not, it wasn't very
It's not gonna be one
specific.
individual for 1 year, we're gonna break that down over multiple years, or?
There were not
That-
specifics associated with it, so that will be left up to the district. but that's not
I
normally,
like that, I
yeah.
mean, lets them craft the parameters,
Right.
Yeah.
you know.
So we'll accept the donation tonight and then, I'll have to have some discussion on how we're gonna.
Right.
I think what you're saying is one student shouldn't get a $35,000
No.
Yeah.
scholarship.
It doesn't
Well, and
happen.
that's, it wasn't, did they intend it
Depth
to
and
be a continuing, or was it a one-time?
Well, most of the time they're to set up a fund that's
That's
multi-year, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have something.
We'll
that we can look
establish
at.
guidelines for that.
Any other questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried.
It does say scholarships in the wording here, so.
Okay, Lisa put that in. Thank you. Assistant Superintendent Sarah.
Well, there's been, a lot going on, even with snow days and crazy weather and all. I'm going to highlight three, and I think Tom will probably cover a few of the other things, but, one thing last Thursday, and you can see some of the results on the wall up here, some of the work that we were doing. We had our second meeting of our tech committee, to really look at, we had three main things for our agenda. One was to look at survey results that the survey committee, as part of the tech committee, had sent out to ask teachers how they use technology, what they would most like, what would they be likely to use if we had more, those kinds of questions. So we went through that data. And then we had a very long discussion on the topic of, again, going back to that one-to-one versus bring your own device conversation. And again, this is a representative group of the whole district, K through 12. And as we continued the conversation, what came about at that table was to continue our practice of an elementary school of having a certain number of iPads available in each classroom so they could be used as a center. iPads, they felt, were good for the elementary school because you use a lot more applications on those rather than having students doing word processing or a lot of typing. And then potentially doing more of a one-to-one program at the middle school where students would be supplied with a district device with the thought that we would roll that in. So in 6th grade, next year, the year after, depending on Smart Schools money, the whole 6th grade would get, then the following year, those now 7th graders would keep the device they got in 6th grade, the new 6th grade would get, so we kind of roll that in instead of trying to give 400 of them all in 1 year, rolling it in that way. And then the conversation got a little bit more, it wasn't heated, but we definitely had differences of opinion as we went to the high school. And we really spent a lot of time talking about, my original proposal had been do the same thing at the high school, one-to-one in 9th grade, and then continue to move it up as people move through. As we talked more, the teachers at the high school did not really end the day with that thought in mind. They really thought more, bring your own device, but then really amp up the amount of devices that are available in the school so that they were really concerned about a variety of different options so that it wasn't all a Chromebook, that there were some classes that the iPad works very well for, some of the programs that they have versus there, of course, are other classes. As a social studies teacher, I probably would have wanted the Chromebook more because it would have been a lot more typing and doing things where you want a keyboard. So that was where we kind of ended that conversation. And really what I said was, okay, thank you, this is all really good feedback. This isn't a decision. This is just feedback for you as we, as a group, discuss it more. We at least kind of know where people are and what they're thinking. And I wrote down, we actually went around the table and every single person kind of had to, they had to say, this is what I think would be best. So I have all that information as we discuss more what direction we want to go in. And then the last thing we did was look at creating a vision statement for technology. We have to have this as part of our new tech plan, which is due, I don't remember if Carol mentioned it in her report or not, but the new tech plan is due to BOCES at the end of June, beginning of July. And part of the tech plan is changing from, this is my understanding, it's changing from being more about the devices, I think, to being a lot more about what are we going to do with them, what's our vision overall, what's our plan moving forward. So one of those is a vision, how it fits in with our overall mission statement for the district, and then how is this driving what decisions we make with the tech plan. And for SMART schools, the tech plan has to be, the SMART schools proposal needs to reflect our tech plan. You know, they have to be in concert. We can't have a tech plan and then the SMART schools say, oh, and we're gonna do this whole different initiative. So what we did as a group, this was just the first stages of it, because this was only a half day, so we didn't have time to really condense things down, but first I had, much like we did when we were creating our mission vision statement, I had people write their own statement about what they thought the direction of the district should be for technology. I had them share with each other, and they either kept their own, you know, took someone else's, or they consolidated and changed, and then we wrote them on the board. And then the last step was, all the underlining was to take a marker and circle or underline on each one the parts that people liked best, the language that they liked best. So now the next step for me is to go through and see, try to craft something from what they've marked in common. So that, if you remember, we did with our, as we were creating our mission vision, we did the same kind of thing. We did it with the whole group, and then we did it as a board, we did it as an administrative team, so that hopefully we can come together as a district to decide, you know, what our vision is for technology as we move forward. So, so it was really, for, again, only being about 3 hours, it was really productive time. There was, I was very impressed with how much the group was interested in what others had to say, and really spent time considering and thinking about the needs of each of the buildings. And I definitely saw some people start out in one place and finish in a different place as they were hearing input. Sorry, I didn't put my glasses.
Okay.
As they were hearing input from one another. So it was definitely a good time. I think we did, as we were looking at the survey, you know, as with almost any survey, we decided we need to refine a little bit more, that it didn't give us all the information that we wanted, and so just to think about, you know, what are the next questions that we would like to ask people. We did get, I believe we got about 50 responses, and we sent it out to all teachers. I'm not sure if we sent to TAs. Lisa, did you get a survey? I don't remember. I think it went to all teachers, but we had
Good response.
we had a pretty good response, and we were very evenly represented.
A little less than that, but still good.
But for something that comes through your email, and the very interesting thing was it was almost evenly represented in each building. So there were somewhere in the upper teens from the middle school, upper teens from the high school, and upper teens, or maybe 20 from the elementary school. Of course, there are more elementary school teachers, so we would have hoped that number was a little bit higher. But the other thing that was part of that conversation too was the possibility of doing a one-to-one for fifth graders too, because they are using, the fifth grade team is using the technology quite a bit, with the thought that that would help. So then in sixth grade, they're not spending as much time about, okay, how do we use this, how do we take care of it? So that was part of the conversation as well. So it was a very, I think, again, I hope that people left feeling like it was a productive use of time, that they had a better understanding of how technology is being used across the district, from one end to the other. So it was a good day, especially given the amount of conversation there was about the possibility of a snow day and how much snow and what's going on the next day. So that happens. I also, this weekend, Sunday and Monday, I was up in Albany at the NISCUS Winter Institute, which was nice. I saw Deborah for a little bit, and she says hello to everyone. And the Institute, they have a cabinet strand, so mostly it's for superintendents, but they have a strand for assistant superintendents. We don't really have our own group. Louise has ASBO, superintendents have, so we're kind of out there in the, so I went up early to do a a pre-session about cabinet members. That was focused, they had a lawyer there, which the main topic of conversation ended up being school safety and the proposed walkouts in the various states, and some of the conversation about that was really pretty useful. And again, networking, just so I talked to people from Salmon River, which is half of it, or a portion of it is actually in Canada, and how they manage that, and some other people. But the keynote speaker was Glenn Singleton, who has spent his life working about talking about courageous conversations, and it's really addressing racism in schools, and really not so much about overt racism, but about the prejudices that we don't even necessarily recognize. And the whole 2-day event was about courageous conversations overall. So the next day, the keynote was difficult conversations, more specific to, even when you're having difficult conversation about a particular topic or performance or those kinds of, so it was a good, with those, there's always really good sessions and ones that aren't so great, but it was a good day, a lot of networking. I saw quite a few of my colleagues, both superintendents and assistant superintendents from across the state, so it was definitely good, and lots of food for thought for me in thinking about how courageous conversations might support my last thing that I wanted to talk about, the poverty study, or the poverty book study that we're doing. This is the month that faculty meetings where staff are having discussions. So today was the elementary school, so I went down there for a little while to sit in with some of those discussions. My intention is always to visit many different discussions, and usually what happens is I get in there and we start talking and I don't get to many more. But the thing that I'm really noticing as we're having these conversations, and even in the conversations we're having outside of the time allotted for the book study, is that focus on community, and both celebrating the fact that we create a very strong community in Highland, but then also talking about what ways can we do better, what ways can we really make our students excited about the community. And one of the topics today, like I said, for 95% of our students, this place, whether it's the elementary, middle, or high school, this is the thing that they have in common. Everyone experiences Highland schools in some way or another. So we want to be sure that that is a positive experience for everyone, and then what are some of the things that we can do about that. So it really has generated some interesting conversations, an interesting direction in the conversation. So it was a great way to end the day.
Sounds good.
Any questions for Sarah?
I do, too. I was just in the technology committee's future plans. Are they gonna interact with students at all? Like, I know we're talking to staff.
You missed our when we talked about the first meeting.
Okay.
When we did the all-day event, we brought the students in, actually Dean can talk about it a little bit as well. We brought the students in for about an hour and did a fishbowl. So we had talked about three
that's
topics.
fine, you've done that.
Yeah,
Students
it was
and
actually,
attaboys.
I mean, hands down, everyone was so impressed by the students, as well as interested to learn their perspective on how technology has been used. And it was about 8 of you, 6 of you, something like that. It was supposed to be maybe more, and then, but 9th through 12th graders. So, and that was very interesting, because our 12th graders, just in those 4 years, have a different experience with technology than our 9th graders have had, because there's just so much more available to them, especially at the elementary and middle school level.
So were they asked about BYOD versus a school issue device? And there was no conclusive?
No. Well, the conclusive, Dean, you want to kind of share what you had said, because I think that was
for me
accepted by everyone.
Yeah, just as my thought of just my thought was instead of just spending the money just to buy everyone a device, not everyone probably will not take that opportunity or might not use that device, or maybe if there's other ways to spend that money, maybe we do that instead. But what I did say is I think what we should do is offer students that want to take on a device from the school, that opportunity. So I don't think it has to be very, binding or crazy. You fill out a form, you ask, and maybe we have options. Maybe you have a Chromebook, maybe it's an iPad, and you can say, I'd like an iPad because, I want that transportation and that's what I'm looking for because I already have a computer at home, but I don't have a cellular device, so the iPad will help me just go into classes and be more prepared. Or maybe one student will need both. Maybe they'll need the iPad and a laptop so they can keep the laptop at home and transport the iPad back to school every day. So I think that's how I felt in the conversation, because I think a lot of students, by the time of high school, have it. So most of us do have a smartphone and a laptop, but there are those that don't, and I think those are the ones that we definitely want to be aiming towards and helping, because I think, like, for me, I wouldn't take a device because I don't want that responsibility because I have my own, but I think a lot of students, even like if their computer breaks, because that happens, if their computer breaks, they can take a laptop out for like a year or maybe 6 months and they got a new one and they just needed to make the money to get a new one. That's how I sort of saw it.
I would say overall that part of the discussion of the table was a lot about equity of access. I mean, the students were very concerned. They wouldn't have used those words necessarily, but they were very concerned about making sure that students had access to internet-ready devices on an equal basis. But many of them did say they don't know that they would necessarily use a school device.
All right, so, and then the other thing I would urge you to do is to go out and do a school visitation, one or two, to those that have various models.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, great, good stuff.
Any other questions for Sarah? Thanks, Sarah.
Yes. So Dean mentioned lunch with soup, so we started that today. I think I mentioned it a few times. So I want to hear from the students. I want to hear what their perspectives are about the school, things that they like about the school that we do, things that they don't like that we do, and then things that we should do and we don't do at all. And you mentioned it. One of the things actually today that the three students each mentioned was the close-knit community. That was one of the great things that they liked about our school and community. I do want to thank Dean and Morgan Calamano and Jasmine Actor. Those are the three students I met with today. And I have 2 other scheduled lunch meetings, but I think they might all get rescheduled to next week. So next week I have 2 more meetings, so that'll be the student council, and then I'll be reaching out to the other clubs here at the high school. And then I'll probably then move, I'll try to do middle school also to hear their thoughts about the middle school. So I think it's important to give the students a voice, and because sometimes they see things through a much different lens than adults do. So thank you, Dean. I don't know if we've spoken about the Ed Foundation Snowball event, but that was my first snowball event, and that was fantastic. It was great being a part of the planning process, and I do want to thank the Ed Foundation for all the work they do for our students. They did give out, we awarded 4 scholarships to the teachers, so that'll be coming down the pike. We'll get more into that when we finalize all that, and we'll be meeting soon again.
And we made almost $8,000.
$8,000, yes. So it was a great event. Yeah. So snow days, it's unbelievable that March now seems to be the month of snow. So we have 1 more allotted snow day to use, okay? I don't know when that would be, no one can predict that really. But let's just say it happens soon. So that'd be our 6th and final snow day, and then after that, certainly, it's already set in the calendar, it's all agreed upon that we do have to give days back, starting with that first Monday of the spring break, but we're not gonna worry about that right now. We do have obviously 2-hour delays. We also have a 3-hour delay schedule that if we had to use to try to preserve our other vacation days, that we can use that. Okay, so no promises to anyone, but that is something that we do have. So certainly safety is always on our minds, but has been a key component of the past recent weeks.
the board is aware of this, I just want the public to be aware also. So last Wednesday, I did do a surprise safety inspection of all the buildings, the school buildings in the district. So I was joined by Chief Wade, Sergeant Rolston, and Tony Lee, who was the Undersheriff of Ulster County. And we went through all the buildings. They gave us, some of the suggestions they gave us really are just changes in behavior, changes in procedures, things that we can do, we can implement automatically, immediately, so, and we are. Other things, suggestions they gave were things that certainly we're gonna look at, they're affordable, probably, and doable now. And other things are things that are more expensive, but actually a lot of the suggestions that they were making are all things that we are already prepared and planned for with our smart bond money, which really is the, securing up the vestibules, cameras, other security measures, the swipes, card swipes at doors. So those are all things that are coming. I do want the board and certainly the public to be aware that, we do have these plans are all in the works, and certainly we would want it to all happen immediately. But in the world of education and state monies coming in, certainly things don't always happen that quickly. But the things that I could do, we've talked about at the last board meeting, different doors. We have tightened things up just how we operate now. Certain doors that were unlocked in the morning are no longer unlocked. Even this door, just so the public knows, the door from the outside coming into the central office wing is now locked. That was always traditionally unlocked during the day. So during the school day, that will be locked. There is a note there on the door stating it's locked, giving you the numbers to call. So if you're going to either special ed or mine and Sarah's office or the business office, it tells you where to call. And or if you're not going to any of those offices, then you do have to walk around to the main entrance of the high school. I do understand that sometimes, when we do safety measures, it's an inconvenience, but you can't weigh convenience with safety. So and certainly now is the time to tighten up. So I did send an email out to all faculty and staff, just reminding everyone, and we're very good about it. So just so the public knows, all classroom doors are locked during the school day. So the door might be open, like this door is open now, but the door itself is locked, so that if an emergency situation occurred, the teacher would just have to close the door, it's already locked. All staff have their IDs on them, and certainly if they need a new ID or an updated ID, we'll get that for them. All staff to have their keys on them at all times, and again, I already mentioned about the door being locked. So safety is always, on our minds, and it's just, it's a different world today. I can't explain it. I wish I knew the reason why these things happen, but certainly our schools are a very safe place, and we continue to make changes in our structure and in our behaviors to keep it safe.